Hey everybody, this is writing micro lesson number 4 on paragraph structure. I'm Rob Glover, and this is for Honors 111 in the Civilization sequence at the Honors College at the University of Maine. So today we're going to talk about paragraph structure. First off, why is paragraph structure so important? Well, paragraph structure helps with the manageability of your writing as a whole. So basically what paragraphs do is break text into smaller units that are digestible for your reader. And so if you're not using paragraph structure effectively, if you have very short paragraphs, that can come across as choppy, and it might not be the best reading experience for your reader. And if you have very long paragraphs, your reader's eyes kind of glaze over. It can be hard to follow a narrative structure if it's embedded in really long paragraphs. So there's kind of a sweet spot with paragraph length and organization that we'll talk about a little bit today. The second point, organization. Paragraphs make your writing more organized. So the choices that you're making as a writer about how you structure your paragraphs are actually choices about how to organize your ideas, your claims, the information that's contained within the text. And so those are really important and consequential choices that again affect readability and how coherent your writing is as a whole. And then lastly, transition. Paragraph structure can, if you use it effectively, provide coherent flow from one idea, argument, assertion, point to another for the reader. And so we'll also talk about how paragraphs are an important tool to make the writing feel as if it is a coherent whole and to guide your reader from one idea to another. So this is really important. Even though paragraph structure seems kind of mundane, it's actually really important for the quality of your writing as a whole. Now I'm going to throw out some common writing challenges that students face, and these are things that you might have encountered on your work in the past, or you might have gotten these comments about writing you've done already at the college level. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how they relate to paragraph structure. So these are some issues that we've all at some point or another probably encountered in our writing, and we've had an external pair of eyes looking at our writing and saying, this is an issue that I'm coming across, and it may actually be linked to your paragraph usage. So one critique or criticism that you might encounter is that you're not developing your points fully enough. And so if you're not developing your points fully enough, that means that in your paragraphs you might be making a claim and then not including sufficient evidence to back up that claim. And so if you were really kind of attuned to individual paragraphs and making sure that everything they needed to include was there, you might have noticed that, right? You might have been able to address that concern and head it off at the pass. You might also face the criticism that your arguments are not coherent. Well, that can be also linked to paragraph usage. So if your paragraphs are not linked to a single main idea or topic sentence, then the overall effect in your writing might be that it's not coherent. The argument is not clear as a whole. You might also face claims that your arguments or ideas are not supported. And again, that's an issue of ensuring that you have a clear topic sentence and you're including evidence to back up your argument. Or you might have someone look at your writing and say, yeah, this is a good piece of writing, but I look at the prompt, the thing that you were supposed to write about, and I'm not seeing how what you're writing is connected to that. Or even I'm looking at your writing, I'm looking at the thesis statement, it seems good. And then as the paper progresses or the essay progresses, you seem to move farther away from it. And that might also be an issue of paragraph usage, and that you're not paying close enough attention to the main ideas of your paragraphs and ensuring that they're linked to the overarching argument, that thesis statement. So attending to our paragraph usage can help us avoid some of these very, very common issues in writing. And it's not just writers that are starting out that encounter these challenges. It's all of us at some point or another are guilty of these sorts of mistakes or these shortcomings in our writing. So again, paragraph usage is very important. All right, so a few warning signs with paragraphs. Oftentimes when I look at a piece of student writing, even before I give it a very close and careful read, I can just look at it visually and have a sense of what issues there might be, or what sorts of challenges I might encounter in reading the piece, and what sorts of comments I might make to the student to give them advice on their writing. And a lot of that comes down just to paragraph length. So in general, when we talk about paragraphs, we're usually talking about somewhere between 4 and 7 sentences will be a typical paragraph in a college level paper. If it's much shorter than that, or it's much beyond that, then that might be a warning sign that there's some larger issue with the student's writing. So a very long paragraph, a paragraph that stretches on for a page or a page and a half, that could mean that you're simply trying to make too many points in a single paragraph. You're simply trying to cram too many arguments and ideas and points into a single paragraph, and you could take that longer paragraph and break it up sometimes into 2, 3, 4 separate paragraphs. So that's a very common issue that I encounter, and as I said, I can almost look at a piece of writing and know if I'm going to encounter that issue. That may also be something linked to just phrasing and wording and how someone writes. So it can also be a sign that a student is not writing concisely enough, and their paragraphs are very long, their sentences are very long, and they're just taking too long to communicate an idea in a sentence, and then it makes the paragraphs longer. But oftentimes it's just that someone is trying to make too many points in a single paragraph. Now, very short paragraphs often means that ideas are not being developed fully or properly. So it could be that this writer is just kind of asserting ideas, they're not providing evidence, they're not providing their own analysis, and so that leads to short and choppy paragraphs. So there might not be sufficient evidence there might not be enough of that writer's own analysis. And again, that's something almost by looking at a piece of writing, I can tell if I'm going to encounter that issue. So those are some warning signs to kind of be aware of with your own writing, is just look at it visually and get a sense of whether you're writing very long paragraphs or very short paragraphs and what steps you could take to address that. What every paragraph ought to contain, what every single paragraph that you write for a piece of writing ought to contain, there's basically 4 components. Perhaps the most important is the topic sentence, sometimes called the main idea. This is simply the major argument, the main point or claim or argument that a paragraph is going to convey. If you want to think of an analogy, it's like the thesis statement of the entire paper or essay, but it's limited to that paragraph. It's just what that paragraph is trying to convey. And this is really important. In general, the topic sentence, especially as writers are starting out, is the first sentence of a paragraph. Very clearly introduces the major point or idea that is to come, but it doesn't have to be the first sentence. But as you're kind of getting your feet under you writing, that might be a good strategy. It's just make the topic sentence the first sentence and then move on to these subsequent components of a paragraph. But keep in mind that there are other ways to do this. The second component of every paragraph is supporting evidence or examples. So you make a claim or you advance an argument, and then you're going to provide some evidence. Now, for a class like this, it could be textual evidence. It could be a quote that you're drawing from the book, or a quote that was made in lecture, an idea that was brought up during our seminars. But there should be some sort of supporting evidence, or there should be an example that substantiates the claim that you're making, or kind of explicates it, draws it out further, and adds new layers of meaning and understanding to that claim. There should generally be some sort of analysis, and that's your own idea or contribution, and that is generally where you're linking back to the overarching argument or the thesis statement. And then lastly, you'll have a concluding sentence, and that really is just kind of slamming the door shut on exploration of a specific idea and creating a bridge to the next idea. Right? It provides an important role in transition. It's good in terms of creating signposts to lead your reader down a path from one idea to the next. And there's all sorts of transitional language that you can use to kind of prepare your reader for the claim that's going to come next. So the concluding sentence is also kind of it plays a transitional role, a bridge role. One of the challenges that students often encounter is, when do they begin a new paragraph? When do I introduce a new paragraph and kind of, make a break and indent and address a new idea? There's a number of different places in which you would begin a new paragraph. And so you have to think very consciously about when you start a new paragraph. So the first and most common place to begin a new paragraph would be when you're introducing a new idea or a point. So if you're moving on from one claim or one argument to another, that's always a new paragraph. And keep in mind too that you may have a very large idea or a larger point that you're trying to convey. The way to approach that is not to have one monster paragraph in which that very complex idea is laid out across multiple pages sometimes, but to break it up into subpoints, right? Any large point or claim that you're going to make in your writing is going to have subpoints. And so then those subpoints are explained across multiple paragraphs. You can also begin a new paragraph when you're contrasting information or ideas. So if if there's a debate about some issue and there's multiple sides to that debate, as you move from one side of that debate to another, that's a really clear and natural place to break and start a new paragraph. If you're laying out a multi-point argument and you're moving to a different point in the argument, again, a very clear and natural place to begin a new paragraph. Or really any form of difference. Anytime you get the sense that, okay, it seems like I was saying, something here and now I'm saying something different, that can be a good sign that you should begin a new paragraph. You also have to be a little bit empathetic and think about your readers a little bit. And it is challenging sometimes to read a piece of work if the ideas aren't broken up sufficiently. And you've probably had that experience where you read a writer and they go on, they have very, very long paragraphs. It can be hard to follow. And so paragraphs are a way that we create breaks for our readers and move from one idea to another. And if a paragraph ends up being too long, then the reader will either have difficulty following and they'll have to kind of backtrack and read certain elements of that paragraph again, or the worst case scenario is that you just lose them altogether and they kind of move on. So you want to be mindful of your reader and give readers a break and break up the ideas that you're presenting in such a way that readers can continue to follow and continue to have interest in what you're writing. And also your introductions and your conclusion, right? Those are elements of the paper that are always set apart. And so the introduction will provide context and introduce your overarching thesis statement. And the conclusion will generally provide some summation of the points that you've made and state something about the significance of what you've analyzed in your piece of writing. And those will always be separate from the body of your paper, right? So you set those apart. You don't necessarily have to do so explicitly. Sometimes I'll see students write in conclusion, and then they move into their conclusion. You don't really need to do that, and the reason why is because of paragraphs. It should be clear to your reader, if you've structured your writing utilizing paragraphs effectively, that now you are in fact moving to your conclusion, and so you don't have to state it explicitly. All right, so we have here an example of a well-constructed paragraph, and I just stole this from a writing center basically off the internet. This was an image that they had of a paragraph that followed this basic outline, and I think is good in terms of just visualizing what this looks like. Now, this is for a more research-based course. I think it's probably like a psychology course. But you see here that they've broken up this piece of writing, this individual paragraph within a larger work, basically according to the divisions that we just laid out. There's a topic sentence, which is in yellow at the top. By its very nature, motivation requires a degree of individual satisfaction or narcissism. So that's the main argument, the main claim that they're putting forth and what this paragraph will address. And then they have some supporting evidence. And in this case, their supporting evidence is drawn from research literature, properly cited, right? So Robbins et al. Suggests that motivation has as its basis the need to focus on and please the self. And then a second piece of evidence from Shaw, Shepard, and Wagaman that is also supporting this main idea, this topic sentence. Then they move into their own analysis, right? So, and they have some language in the sentence to suggest that they're doing so. And then they close with a concluding statement. These strategies, with their focus on personal needs, demonstrate that narcissism is an essential component of motivation. So that's a very, tightly constructed and well-constructed paragraph that basically follows this outline. And you could imagine, as you start to assemble multiple paragraphs and move from one to another, that this would be relatively easy to follow. And it would be very clear what the purpose of the individual paragraphs was, and also it would ideally relate back to the overarching thesis statement. So I encourage you to think about that in your own writing, like really zero in on individual paragraphs. And if you look at a paragraph and you can't answer questions like, what is the topic sentence? What is the main idea of this paragraph? What evidence am I providing? What analysis of my own am I adding? And how am I concluding this sentence and potentially providing a bridge or a transition to a new idea or a new claim? If you can't answer those questions, or it's not clear in your own writing, then that suggests that you really need to attend to your paragraph structure and make sure that you're being intentional in how you construct your paragraphs. Now, the key guidelines for this week's writing assignment will be these core components that paragraph structure is designed to provide. Is your choice of paragraphs making your writing manageable? Is it well organized? And are you intentional about how you're organizing your ideas? And are you following that structure we've laid out? And are your paragraphs providing an effective transition or bridge from one idea to another? So you really want to focus in on that. And also these individual components of paragraphs, how paragraphs are constructed and what's supposed to be within them. And as I said, the core thing, just even looking at your writing visually, that can help guide you on this is paragraph length. And it should be relatively uniform if the paragraphs are each doing what they're intended to do. I also have a few outside sources here that I think are pretty useful, and I actually referred to them in putting together this presentation. The Purdue Online Writing Lab, which I know I mention again and again in this class, has some very good guidance on paragraph structure. And also the University of Maryland Writing Center has good guidance on paragraph structure and how to construct paragraphs effectively. And you have the links there if you want to just search for those things: Purdue OWL paragraph structure or University of Maryland Writing Center paragraph structure. You would probably find them there as well. So we'll wrap up there for this week's micro lesson, and I look forward to reading your work.